Chapter 1, Introduction. In this chapter, we will delve into the background information and purpose of the report, setting the stage for our exploration of the Red Union of Soviet Socialist Republics and the events surrounding the fall of the Berlin Wall. 1.1 Background information. The Red Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, commonly known as the Soviet Union, was a vast communist state that existed from 1922 to 1991. It emerged after the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917 and went on to become a global superpower, with significant influence in Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and parts of Africa and Latin America. The Soviet Union was founded on Marxist-Leninist principles, with the goal of establishing a classless society and a command economy. Under the leadership of figures like Vladimir Lenin and Joseph Stalin, the Soviet Union embarked on rapid industrialization and collectivization, transforming the country from an agrarian society into an industrial powerhouse. 1.2 Purpose of the report. The purpose of this report is to examine the history, culture, and geopolitical dynamics of the Soviet Union, focusing on the countries that broke free from its grip and those that chose to remain. Additionally, we will explore the oppression faced by individuals within the Soviet Union and the events leading up to the fall of the Berlin Wall. By studying the Red Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, we aim to gain a deeper understanding of the complexities of its history and the impact it had on the world. The report will also shed light on the current actions taken by Russia to regain its influence as the successor state of the Soviet Union. Throughout the chapters that follow, we will analyze the historical context, delve into cultural aspects such as literature, art, and music, examine the countries that gained independence from the Soviet Union, and explore the reasons why some countries chose to remain part of the Union. We will also address the oppressive nature of the regime and the violation of human rights that occurred within its borders. The chapter on the fall of the Berlin Wall will provide an in-depth analysis of the events leading up to this pivotal moment in history. We will discuss the economic and political factors that contributed to the wall's collapse, as well as the implications and consequences of reunification for Germany and the wider European region. Lastly, we will explore the actions taken by Russia under the leadership of Vladimir Putin to regain its status as a global power and to reassert control over former Soviet republics. This will include an examination of Russia's annexation of Crimea and its ongoing relations with countries that were once part of the Soviet Union. Overall, this report aims to provide a comprehensive understanding of the Red Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, its history, the countries it affected, and the impact it continues to have on the geopolitical landscape. By examining these topics, we hope to shed light on the complexities and legacies of the Soviet Union, as well as its enduring relevance in the modern world. 1.3 Historical Overview. To fully comprehend the significance of the Red Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, we must delve into its historical context. The formation of the Soviet Union can be traced back to the aftermath of the Russian Revolution in 1917. The Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, overthrew the provisional government and established a socialist state. Under Lenin's leadership, the Soviet Union underwent significant transformations. The new economic policy, NEP, was implemented to revive the economy, allowing limited private enterprise while maintaining state control over key industries. However, after Lenin's death, Joseph Stalin emerged as the dominant figure in Soviet politics and initiated a period of intense industrialization and collectivization. Stalin's policies aimed to rapidly transform the Soviet Union into an industrial powerhouse, but they came at a great cost. Collectivization of agriculture led to widespread famine and loss of life, while Stalin's purges resulted in the execution or imprisonment of millions of people, including political dissidents, intellectuals, and perceived threats to his regime. 1.4 Cultural Aspects. The culture of the Soviet Union was influenced by socialist realism, an artistic and literary movement that promoted the ideals of communism. Literature, art, and music played an essential role in shaping the cultural landscape of the Soviet Union. Prominent writers like Maxim Gorky, Mikhail Bulgakov, and Boris Pasternak produced works that reflected the realities of life in the Soviet Union, often dealing with themes of struggle, sacrifice, and the human spirit. Architecture and design also played a significant role in Soviet culture. Grand structures, such as the iconic Moscow State University and the imposing Palace of the Soviets, showcased the grandeur and power of the Soviet state. Constructivist architecture emphasized functionality and modernity, with a focus on communal living and communal spaces. Film and theater were important mediums for propaganda and entertainment. Soviet cinema produced renowned filmmakers like Sergei Eisenstein and Andrei Tarkovsky, whose works explored political and philosophical themes. The Soviet theater scene showcased experimental and avant-garde performances, pushing the boundaries of artistic expression. 1.5 Countries that broke free. One of the defining aspects of the Soviet Union's history was the independence movements of various republics within its borders. Following the economic and political reforms initiated by Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev in the 1980s, several republics began seeking greater autonomy and ultimately independence. The Baltic states, including Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, were among the first to declare independence in the early 1990s. These countries, having been forcibly incorporated into the Soviet Union during World War II, sought to reclaim their national identities and establish their own democratic governments. Other republics, such as Ukraine, Belarus, and Moldova, also declared independence but faced varying degrees of political and social challenges in their transition to nationhood. Some regions, like Chechnya in the North Caucasus, experienced violent conflicts as they sought to break away from the Soviet Union. 1.6 Countries that chose to stay. While some republics broke free from the Soviet Union, others chose to remain within its fold. Kazakhstan, the largest republic in terms of territory, and Belarus, led by President Alexander Lukashenko, maintained close ties to Russia. These countries formed the Commonwealth of Independent States, CIS, a loose alliance of former Soviet republics. The decision to stay within the Soviet Union or join the CIS was influenced by various factors, including economic dependencies, ethnic and cultural ties, and political considerations. Some regions, like Crimea, which had a significant Russian population, later sought to reunite with Russia, leading to tensions and conflicts in the post-Soviet era. 1.7 Oppression within the Soviet Union. While the Soviet Union projected itself as a utopian society built on equality and solidarity, the reality was far from ideal. The regime was marked by widespread oppression and violations of human rights. Human rights abuses were prevalent throughout the Soviet Union's history. Political dissidents, intellectuals, and individuals perceived as threats to the regime were subjected to surveillance, harassment, and imprisonment. The secret police, known as the KGB, played a crucial role in maintaining control and silencing dissent. One of the most notorious periods of repression was under Joseph Stalin's rule. The Great Purge, also known as the Great Terror, resulted in the execution or imprisonment of millions of Soviet citizens. The purges targeted not only political opponents but also ordinary citizens, as anyone deemed a potential threat to the regime could become a victim. Freedom of speech and expression were severely curtailed. Censorship was pervasive, with the state controlling all forms of media. Writers, artists, and filmmakers had to adhere to strict ideological guidelines and obtain official approval for their works. Dissident voices were silenced, and alternative perspectives were suppressed. The Soviet Union also practiced religious repression, particularly targeting religious institutions and leaders. Churches and mosques were closed or destroyed, and religious practices were discouraged or prohibited. The state promoted atheism as the official ideology, viewing religion as a threat to the socialist order. 1.8 The fall of the Berlin Wall. One of the most iconic moments in modern history was the fall of the Berlin Wall on November 9, 1989. The wall, constructed in 1961 to divide East and West Berlin, became a symbol of the Cold War and the ideological divide between communism and capitalism. The events leading up to the fall of the Berlin Wall were shaped by a combination of internal and external factors. Internally, the Soviet Union was undergoing significant political and economic changes under the leadership of Mikhail Gorbachev. Gorbachev's policies of glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring, aimed to reform the Soviet Union and address its economic challenges. Externally, the geopolitical landscape was shifting. The Eastern Bloc countries, including East Germany, were experiencing widespread protests and demands for political reform. The movement for change gained momentum, and the pressure on the Soviet Union to loosen its grip on its satellite states increased. On the evening of November 9, 1989, an announcement by the East German government that travel restrictions would be eased resulted in a spontaneous surge of people flocking to the wall. Thousands of East Germans crossed the border freely, symbolizing a new era of freedom and reunification. The fall of the Berlin Wall had profound implications and consequences. It paved the way for the reunification of Germany, which took place on October 3, 1990, ending decades of division. The event also signaled the decline of the Soviet Union and the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe. 1.9 Actions taken to regain the Great Motherland. In the aftermath of the Soviet Union's dissolution in 1991, Russia emerged as its successor state. Under the leadership of Vladimir Putin, Russia sought to regain its status as a global power and reclaim its influence over former Soviet republics. One significant action taken by Russia was the annexation of Crimea in 2014. Following political unrest and the ousting of Ukraine's pro-Russian president, Russia swiftly moved to annex Crimea, a strategically important region with a majority ethnic Russian population. The annexation was met with international condemnation, leading to sanctions against Russia. Additionally, Russia has pursued closer ties with other former Soviet republics through various means, including economic partnerships, military cooperation, and cultural exchange. The Eurasian Economic Union, established in 2015, aims to promote economic integration among member states and enhance Russia's regional influence. Russia's actions to regain its influence over former Soviet republics have been met with mixed reactions. While some countries maintain close ties with Russia, others seek to strengthen their relationships with Western nations and distance themselves from Russian influence. 1.10 Legacy and relevance. The legacy of the Red Union of Soviet Socialist republics is complex and multifaceted. Despite its eventual collapse, the Soviet Union left an indelible mark on the world stage and continues to shape geopolitical dynamics to this day. Economically, the Soviet Union's centralized planned economy was a unique experiment that had both successes and failures. While it achieved rapid industrialization and scientific advancements, it also suffered from inefficiencies, corruption, and a lack of consumer goods. The collapse of the Soviet Union led to a transition to market-oriented economies in the newly independent states, with varying degrees of success. The political legacy of the Soviet Union is also significant. The authoritarian nature of the regime, marked by a lack of political freedoms, repression of dissent, and concentration of power, had a lasting impact on the political systems of successor states. Many of these countries continue to grapple with issues of democracy, governance, and human rights as they strive to establish stable and inclusive political systems. The Soviet Union's cultural influence extended far beyond its borders. Its literature, art, music, and cinema had a profound impact on global culture and influenced generations of artists and thinkers. Soviet literature, such as the works of Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, remains revered worldwide, while filmmakers like Eisenstein revolutionized the art of cinema. Geopolitically, the dissolution of the Soviet Union fundamentally altered the balance of power in international relations. The end of the Cold War led to a unipolar world dominated by the United States, with Russia seeking to reassert itself as a global power in more recent years. The geopolitical struggles and conflicts in the post-Soviet era, particularly in Eastern Europe and the Caucasus, are a testament to the ongoing reverberations of the Soviet Union's legacy. Furthermore, the Soviet Union's collapse brought about a significant reconfiguration of borders and identities. Newly independent states emerged from the ashes of the Soviet Union, each grappling with the challenges of nation-building, ethnic tensions, and forging new national identities. The complexities of these transitions continue to shape regional dynamics in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. In a broader sense, the rise and fall of the Soviet Union serve as a reminder of the limitations and pitfalls of totalitarian regimes. The oppressive nature of the Soviet regime and the human rights abuses committed during its existence serve as cautionary tales and reminders of the importance of upholding democratic principles, human rights, and the rule of law. As we delve deeper into the subsequent chapters of this report, we will explore these themes in greater detail. By examining the historical events, cultural aspects, and geopolitical dynamics of the Soviet Union, we aim to gain a comprehensive understanding of its legacy and its enduring relevance in the modern world. 1.11 Current State of Affairs. Understanding the current state of affairs in the aftermath of the Red Union of Soviet Socialist republics is essential to comprehending the lasting impact of this historical period. Today, the successor state of the Soviet Union, Russia, continues to assert its influence on the global stage, albeit in a different geopolitical landscape. Under the leadership of Vladimir Putin, Russia has pursued a more assertive foreign policy, seeking to regain its status as a global power. Putin has emphasized the importance of restoring Russia's great power status and has taken measures to consolidate political control and centralize power within the country. Russia's actions in recent years have raised concerns among Western nations and neighboring states. The annexation of Crimea in 2014 was met with widespread international condemnation, leading to diplomatic tensions and economic sanctions. The ongoing conflict in eastern Ukraine between Ukrainian forces and pro-Russian separatists has further strained relations between Russia and the West. Additionally, Russia's military interventions in Georgia in 2008 and in Syria in 2015 have demonstrated its willingness to project power beyond its borders. These actions have sparked debates about Russia's intentions and its approach to regional and global security. Russia's relationships with former Soviet republics remain a significant aspect of its foreign policy. Some countries, particularly those with significant ethnic Russian populations, maintain close ties with Russia, while others seek to strengthen their alliances with Western nations and distance themselves from Russian influence. This geopolitical tug-of-war continues to shape regional dynamics in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Internally, Russia has faced challenges related to human rights, freedom of the press, and political dissent. Critics argue that the Russian government has increasingly restricted civil liberties and cracked down on opposition voices. The poisoning and imprisonment of opposition figure Alexei Navalny, along with the suppression of protests, have drawn international scrutiny and condemnation. 1.12 Relevance to the modern world. The study of the Red Union of Soviet Socialist republics remains relevant to the modern world for several reasons. First and foremost, understanding the historical context and legacies of the Soviet Union is crucial for comprehending the geopolitical dynamics and challenges that persist in the post-Soviet space. The fall of the Berlin Wall and the subsequent collapse of the Soviet Union marked a turning point in global affairs, ushering in a new era of international relations. The end of the Cold War shifted the balance of power and created opportunities and challenges for countries around the world. Furthermore, the Soviet Union's history serves as a reminder of the dangers of authoritarianism, the importance of human rights, and the necessity of upholding democratic values. The oppressive nature of the Soviet regime and the violations of human rights that occurred within its borders stand as cautionary tales and reminders of the need to safeguard individual liberties and democratic institutions. The cultural impact of the Soviet Union is also significant. Soviet literature, art, and cinema continue to be studied and appreciated for their artistic merit and their reflection of the human experience in a challenging political environment. Understanding this cultural legacy contributes to a broader understanding of global culture and the ways in which art can both reflect and challenge societal norms. Moreover, the geopolitical implications of the Soviet Union's collapse and Russia's subsequent actions continue to shape international relations. The relationships between Russia and neighboring states, as well as its interactions with Western nations, have implications for regional stability, security, and economic cooperation. 1.13 Lessons Learned and Future Implications. Examining the Red Union of Soviet Socialist republics provides an opportunity to learn from history and identify potential future implications. The rise and fall of the Soviet Union offer valuable lessons and insights that can inform our understanding of political, economic, and social systems. One key lesson is the importance of balance in governance and the potential dangers of excessive centralization of power. The Soviet Union's highly centralized system, with power concentrated in the hands of the Communist Party and its leaders, contributed to inefficiencies, corruption, and a lack of accountability. This serves as a reminder of the need for checks and balances, transparency, and inclusive decision-making processes in any political system. Another lesson is the importance of fostering economic diversity and innovation. The Soviet Union's emphasis on heavy industry and state-controlled planning limited economic growth and innovation in other sectors. By contrast, market-oriented economies have proven to be more adaptable, dynamic, and resilient. Embracing entrepreneurship, fostering innovation, and promoting a diversified economy can contribute to long-term economic stability and prosperity. The collapse of the Soviet Union also highlights the significance of managing ethnic and cultural diversity within a nation-state. The Soviet Union was a multinational federation, encompassing various ethnic groups and cultures. However, tensions and conflicts arose due to disparities in economic development, perceived inequalities, and nationalist aspirations. Acknowledging and respecting the rights and identities of diverse communities is crucial for maintaining stability and social cohesion within a country. The events surrounding the fall of the Berlin Wall and the subsequent geopolitical realignments underscore the importance of diplomacy, dialogue, and cooperation in resolving conflicts and building peaceful relationships. The peaceful reunification of Germany and the subsequent efforts to integrate Eastern European countries into the European Union demonstrate the potential for constructive engagement and collaboration among nations. Furthermore, the legacy of the Soviet Union highlights the significance of human rights and the protection of individual freedoms. The oppression and human rights abuses within the Soviet Union serve as a reminder of the importance of upholding universal human rights principles, promoting freedom of expression, and fostering an inclusive and tolerant society. Looking ahead, the future implications of the Soviet Union's history and its aftermath are multifaceted. The geopolitical landscape continues to evolve, with Russia seeking to assert its influence on the global stage. Balancing the interests of Russia, neighboring states, and the international community will require ongoing dialogue, negotiation, and diplomacy. The economic challenges and opportunities in the post-Soviet space remain a focal point for regional and global actors. Enhancing economic cooperation, promoting sustainable development, and addressing disparities within and between countries will be critical for fostering stability and prosperity. Moreover, the cultural legacy of the Soviet Union continues to shape artistic expressions, literature, and cinema. The exploration of Soviet culture and its impact on contemporary societies provides insights into the human experience and contributes to the richness of global cultural diversity. Chapter 2: The Formation of the Red Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. 2.1 Historical Background. The formation of the Red Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, was a significant event in the 20th century that would profoundly impact global politics for decades to come. This chapter delves into the historical context and key factors that led to the establishment of the Soviet Union. The seeds of the Soviet Union were sown during the tumultuous years of the Russian Revolution. In 1917, the Bolshevik Party, led by Vladimir Lenin, overthrew the Russian Provisional Government, establishing a socialist state. The Bolsheviks aimed to create a society based on Marxist principles, where the means of production would be controlled by the working class. 2.2 The Bolshevik Revolution and Consolidation of Power. The Bolshevik Revolution marked a turning point in Russian history. The revolutionaries embarked on a series of radical reforms, including the nationalization of industry, land redistribution, and the establishment of workers' councils, known as Soviets. The Bolsheviks' message resonated with many who were disillusioned with the social, economic, and political inequalities of the time. However, the Bolsheviks faced significant challenges in their quest to consolidate power. The Russian Civil War erupted in 1918, pitting the Red Army, loyal to the Bolsheviks, against various counter-revolutionary forces known as the Whites. The conflict was characterized by widespread violence, political intrigue, and foreign intervention. Led by military strategists such as Leon Trotsky, the Red Army ultimately emerged victorious, securing the Bolsheviks' hold on power. The Civil War had a devastating impact on the country, resulting in mass casualties, famine, and economic devastation. It also served as a crucible for shaping the future direction of the Soviet Union. 2.3 Formation of the Soviet Union. Following the consolidation of power, the Bolsheviks sought to solidify their control over the territories of the former Russian Empire. Recognizing the diverse ethnic and cultural makeup of the region, the Bolshevik leadership proposed a federation of socialist republics that would collectively form the Soviet Union. On December 30, 1922, the Treaty on the Creation of the USSR was signed, officially establishing the Red Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. The initial composition of the USSR included 4 founding republics: the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic, RSFSR, the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic, UKRSSR, the Byelorussian Soviet Socialist Republic, BSSR, and the Transcaucasian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic, TSFSR, which encompassed Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. The establishment of the Soviet Union was met with mixed reactions both domestically and internationally. For some, it represented a revolutionary experiment and the promise of a more egalitarian society. Others, however, viewed it as a threat to established power structures and feared the spread of communism beyond Russia's borders. 2.4 Challenges and consolidation. The early years of the Soviet Union were marked by significant challenges and upheavals. The country faced economic turmoil, food shortages, and political unrest. In response, the Bolshevik government implemented a series of policies aimed at transforming the economy and consolidating their power. One of the most notable policies was the process of war communism, which involved the nationalization of industry and the requisitioning of agricultural produce to support the Red Army and sustain the revolution. However, war communism led to widespread economic dislocation, exacerbating the suffering of the population. Recognizing the need for a shift in economic policy, the Soviet government introduced the New Economic Policy, NEP, in 1921. The NEP allowed for limited private enterprise, market mechanisms, and trade with other countries. This period of relative economic liberalization brought some stability and a modest improvement in living conditions. In addition to economic challenges, the Soviet Union faced internal divisions and power struggles within the ruling Communist Party. The death of Vladimir Lenin in 1924 set the stage for a power struggle between his successors, particularly Joseph Stalin and Leon Trotsky. Stalin ultimately emerged as the victor, consolidating his power and implementing policies that would transform the Soviet Union. 2.5 Socialist industrialization and collectivization. Under Stalin's leadership, the Soviet Union embarked on a program of rapid industrialization and collectivization of agriculture. These policies aimed to transform the Soviet Union from an agrarian society into an industrial powerhouse and to eliminate private ownership of land. The first 5-year plan, launched in 1928, set ambitious targets for industrial output, focusing on heavy industries such as coal, steel, and machinery. The plan involved massive state investment, forced labor, and the mobilization of resources to achieve rapid industrial growth. Despite the hardships and sacrifices endured by the population, the plan succeeded in achieving significant industrialization. In parallel with industrialization, Stalin implemented a policy of collectivization in agriculture. Private farms were forcibly merged into collective farms, known as kolkhozes, where land and resources were shared among farmers. Collectivization aimed to increase agricultural productivity, consolidate control over the rural population, and provide a steady food supply for the growing urban workforce. However, collectivization was met with resistance and led to widespread disruptions in agricultural production. The forcible requisitioning of grain and the elimination of private farming resulted in peasant uprisings, mass famine, and the loss of millions of lives. The consequences of collectivization would have a lasting impact on the Soviet Union's agricultural sector and the lives of its people. 2.6 Cultural and social transformations. Alongside economic and political changes, the Soviet Union underwent significant cultural and social transformations during its early years. The Bolshevik government sought to shape a new socialist consciousness and break with the traditions and values of the past. A cultural revolution known as the proletarian culture aimed to promote art, literature, and music that reflected the ideals of the working class. Artists and writers were expected to contribute to the construction of a new socialist society, portraying the struggles and achievements of the proletariat. However, artistic and intellectual freedom was not without constraints. The government exercised strict control over cultural production, promoting socialist realism as the dominant artistic style. Dissident voices and nonconformist artists faced censorship, persecution, and exile. Socially, the Soviet Union sought to promote gender equality and transform traditional family structures. Women were encouraged to participate in the workforce and were granted legal rights, including access to education, employment, and divorce. The state also aimed to provide social benefits, such as child care facilities and maternity leave, to support working women. 2.7 Impact on nationalities and ethnic groups. The formation of the Soviet Union had far-reaching consequences for the nationalities and ethnic groups within its borders. The Soviet leadership recognized the diverse ethnic makeup of the country and sought to address the national question by establishing a federation of socialist republics. The new Soviet state adopted a policy of cultural autonomy, granting ethnic groups the right to develop their own languages, education systems, and cultural institutions. This policy aimed to foster a sense of national identity and promote a sense of equality among the various nationalities. However, the implementation of cultural autonomy varied across different regions, and tensions emerged between the dominant Russian culture and the minority ethnic groups. The Soviet government also faced challenges in balancing the demands for national self-determination with the need for centralized control. In some cases, ethnic tensions escalated into conflicts. The Soviet Union experienced uprisings and nationalist movements in regions such as Ukraine, the Caucasus, and the Baltic states. These movements often sought greater autonomy or independence from the Central Soviet government. The Soviet leadership responded to these challenges with a combination of political repression, cultural assimilation, and limited concessions. The suppression of nationalist movements and the forced resettlement of entire ethnic groups, such as the Crimean Tatars, had a lasting impact on the affected communities. 2.8 Socialist internationalism and anti-imperialism. The establishment of the Soviet Union also had profound implications for international relations. The Soviet leadership, guided by the principles of Marxism-Leninism, viewed the formation of the Soviet state as the first step towards a global revolution. The Soviet Union actively promoted socialist internationalism and supported communist movements and anti-colonial struggles around the world. The Comintern, or the Communist International, was established to coordinate the activities of communist parties worldwide and promote revolution against capitalist and colonial powers. The Soviet Union provided material and ideological support to revolutionary movements, particularly in developing countries. It viewed itself as a champion of the oppressed and sought to undermine the influence of imperialist powers. The geopolitical rivalry between the Soviet Union and the capitalist West, particularly the United States, would come to define much of the 20th century. This ideological divide, known as the Cold War, shaped global politics and led to a series of proxy conflicts and confrontations. 2.9 Legacies and debates. The formation of the Soviet Union left a lasting legacy on both the territories it incorporated and the broader global stage. The Soviet experiment represented an alternative model to capitalism and influenced political and social movements around the world. Debates continue to surround the Soviet Union's legacy. Supporters argue that the Soviet Union made significant strides in industrialization, education, healthcare, and women's rights. They point to achievements such as the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II and the Soviet space program as evidence of the country's accomplishments. Critics, on the other hand, highlight the human rights abuses, political repression, and economic inefficiencies that characterized the Soviet regime. They argue that the centralized planning and lack of political freedom stifled innovation, creativity, and individual liberties. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 marked the end of the Red Union of Soviet Socialist republics and the beginning of a new era. The subsequent chapters of this report will delve deeper into the history and dynamics of the Soviet Union, examining the countries that broke free, the people who experienced oppression, and the geopolitical developments that continue to shape the region. By understanding the formation of the Soviet Union and its consequences, we can gain valuable insights into the complexities of this historical period and its ongoing relevance in the modern world. 2.10 Economic Transformation and Planned Economy. One of the defining characteristics of the Soviet Union was its adoption of a centrally planned economy. Following the establishment of the USSR, the Soviet government embarked on a comprehensive transformation of the economic system, aiming to build a socialist society based on collective ownership of the means of production. Central planning involved the state's control and direction of economic activities, including the allocation of resources, setting production targets, and determining prices. 5-year plans were developed to guide economic development and prioritize key sectors such as heavy industry, energy, and infrastructure. The planned economy enabled the Soviet Union to achieve rapid industrialization, transforming the country from an agrarian society into a major industrial power. New factories, dams, and transportation networks were constructed, and the production of steel, coal, and machinery surged. The Soviet Union became a formidable competitor on the global stage, challenging the dominance of capitalist economies. However, the planned economy also had its limitations and drawbacks. The lack of market mechanisms and the centralization of decision-making resulted in inefficiencies, shortages, and a lack of consumer goods. The state's control over economic activities stifled innovation, as entrepreneurial initiatives and individual incentives were curtailed. Additionally, the planned economy often prioritized heavy industry at the expense of other sectors, leading to imbalances in the economy. Agriculture, in particular, suffered from neglect and underinvestment, resulting in chronic food shortages and reliance on imports. 2.11 The role of propaganda and ideology. The establishment of the Soviet Union coincided with the rise of state-sponsored propaganda and the development of an official ideology. The Soviet government employed various means to shape public opinion, promote loyalty to the regime, and foster a sense of collective identity. Propaganda played a central role in disseminating the ideals of socialism, promoting the achievements of the Soviet state, and denouncing capitalist societies. Newspapers, radio broadcasts, films, and art were used as powerful tools to convey the government's messages and maintain control over the narrative. The official ideology of the Soviet Union, Marxism-Leninism, served as a guiding framework for the governance and policies of the state. It provided a theoretical foundation for the establishment of a classless society, the transition from capitalism to socialism, and the ultimate achievement of communism. Marxism-Leninism also justified the concentration of power in the hands of the Communist Party and the suppression of dissenting voices. Those who deviated from the party line or expressed critical views were often labeled as enemies of the state and subjected to persecution, censorship, or imprisonment. The pervasive nature of propaganda and ideology had a profound impact on the mindset and behavior of the Soviet population. It shaped their perception of the world, their understanding of history, and their loyalty to the state. However, it also bred conformity, limited intellectual freedom, and restricted the diversity of ideas and perspectives. 2.12 Social welfare and education. Despite the challenges and shortcomings of the Soviet system, the establishment of the USSR brought significant advancements in social welfare and education. The Soviet government implemented policies aimed at improving the living conditions of the population and providing access to education and healthcare. Education was a key priority for the Soviet Union, as it played a vital role in shaping the new socialist society. The government invested heavily in expanding educational opportunities, promoting literacy, and providing free education at all levels. This focus on education resulted in a highly educated population and a strong emphasis on technical and scientific disciplines. Healthcare also underwent significant reforms, with the establishment of a state-funded healthcare system. The Soviet Union achieved notable progress in healthcare outcomes, including increased life expectancy, reduced infant mortality rates, and advancements in medical research. Social welfare programs were implemented to provide support to vulnerable groups, such as the elderly, disabled, and low-income individuals. Pensions, social security, and subsidized housing were among the measures aimed at improving the quality of life for all citizens. However, it is important to note that these advancements were not evenly distributed throughout the Soviet Union. Rural areas often lagged behind urban centers in terms of access to quality education and healthcare. Additionally, social welfare programs faced resource constraints and inefficiencies, leading to disparities in the availability and quality of services. 2.13 The impact on culture and arts. The establishment of the Soviet Union had a profound impact on culture and the arts. The Soviet government sought to use culture as a means of promoting socialist ideals, shaping public consciousness, and fostering a sense of national identity. The early years of the Soviet Union witnessed a period of intense artistic experimentation and innovation. Avant-garde movements such as constructivism, suprematism, and futurism emerged, challenging traditional artistic conventions and embracing new forms of expression. Artists, writers, and intellectuals were encouraged to engage with the social and political realities of the time and contribute to the construction of a new socialist society. Their works often depicted the struggles and achievements of the working class, highlighting themes of class consciousness, social justice, and collective action. However, the artistic freedom and experimentation of the early years were short-lived. As the Soviet government consolidated its power, it began to exert greater control over cultural production and impose ideological restrictions. Socialist realism emerged as the dominant artistic style, emphasizing the depiction of realistic and optimistic portrayals of Soviet life. Under the doctrine of socialist realism, artists were expected to depict the achievements of the Soviet state, glorify the working class, and promote the ideals of socialism. This led to a homogenization of artistic expression, as artists were required to conform to the approved aesthetic and ideological guidelines. Those who deviated from the prescribed style or expressed critical views faced censorship, persecution, or exile. Many artists and writers were forced to conform or risk being labeled as enemies of the state. The suppression of artistic freedom stifled creativity and innovation, limiting the diversity of artistic expression. Despite these restrictions, Soviet culture and arts continued to evolve and reflect the changing social and political landscape. Literature, theater, cinema, and music played crucial roles in shaping public opinion, disseminating propaganda, and promoting the values of the Soviet state. Notable figures such as Maxim Gorky, Boris Pasternak, Sergei Eisenstein, and Dmitry Shostakovich made significant contributions to Soviet culture and left enduring legacies. Their works captured the complexities and contradictions of Soviet society, exploring themes of individual struggle, political repression, and the search for meaning in a socialist world. 2.14 Science, Technology, and Space Exploration. The Soviet Union made significant advancements in science, technology, and space exploration, cementing its reputation as a global superpower. The Soviet government invested heavily in scientific research, aiming to showcase the superiority of the socialist system and challenge the technological prowess of capitalist nations. In the field of space exploration, the Soviet Union achieved several groundbreaking milestones. On October 4, 1957, the Soviet satellite Sputnik became the first human-made object to orbit the Earth, marking the beginning of the space age. This feat was followed by the launch of the first living creature, the dog Laika, aboard Sputnik 2 in November 1957. In 1961, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human to travel into space, orbiting the Earth aboard the Vostok 1 spacecraft. This achievement was a significant triumph for the Soviet Union and a testament to its technological capabilities. The Soviet Union continued to make strides in space exploration throughout the following decades. Notable achievements include the first woman in space, Valentina Tereshkova, aboard Vostok 6 in 1963, and the first spacewalk by Alexei Leonov in 1965. In 1969, the Soviet Union's Luna 2 probe became the first human-made object to reach the Moon, and in 1970, the Luna 16 mission successfully returned a sample of lunar soil to Earth. These accomplishments in space exploration not only demonstrated the Soviet Union's scientific and technological prowess but also had political and ideological implications. They were seen as symbolic victories in the ongoing Cold War rivalry with the United States, challenging American dominance in the space race and bolstering Soviet prestige. In addition to space exploration, the Soviet Union made significant advancements in other scientific fields, including physics, chemistry, biology, and mathematics. Soviet scientists made groundbreaking discoveries and contributed to the global scientific community. The Soviet education system played a crucial role in nurturing scientific talent and promoting scientific research. Universities and research institutes were established throughout the country, providing opportunities for aspiring scientists to pursue their studies and contribute to the advancement of knowledge. Despite these achievements, it is important to acknowledge that the scientific community in the Soviet Union was not immune to political interference. Scientists were expected to align their research with the priorities of the state and support the ideological agenda of the government. This occasionally led to the suppression of scientific dissent and the promotion of pseudo-scientific theories that aligned with the official ideology. 2.15 The role of women in Soviet society. The establishment of the Soviet Union brought significant changes to the role of women in society. The Soviet government proclaimed gender equality as a fundamental principle and implemented policies aimed at empowering women and dismantling traditional gender roles. Women were encouraged to participate in all aspects of public life, including education, employment, politics, and the military. The Soviet Union became one of the first countries to grant women the right to vote and hold public office. Women's representation in government bodies increased, and they played active roles in the Communist Party. The Soviet government recognized the importance of women's labor and sought to integrate them into the workforce. Women were encouraged to pursue education and careers in various fields, including science, engineering, medicine, and industry. The state provided support for working mothers, such as child care facilities and maternity leave. The government also implemented policies to address gender inequality within the family. Marriage and divorce laws were reformed to promote gender equality, and efforts were made to combat domestic violence and promote shared household responsibilities. Soviet propaganda and education emphasized the importance of gender equality and the contributions of women to society. Women were depicted as strong, capable, and equal partners in the construction of socialism. This representation helped shape the perception of women's roles and challenged traditional patriarchal norms. While these policies and efforts were significant in advancing women's rights, it is important to acknowledge that gender equality was not fully realized in practice. Women still faced challenges and discrimination, particularly in relation to career advancement and wage parity. Traditional gender norms and stereotypes persisted in certain spheres of society, limiting women's opportunities and choices. 2.16 Environmental impact and industrialization. The rapid industrialization of the Soviet Union had significant environmental consequences. The government's focus on heavy industry and the exploitation of natural resources led to extensive pollution, deforestation, and degradation of ecosystems. The Soviet Union's drive for industrialization resulted in the construction of numerous factories, power plants, and infrastructure projects. These developments often prioritized economic growth over environmental considerations, leading to the release of pollutants into the air, water, and soil. The Aral Sea, once the fourth largest lake in the world, is a striking example of the environmental impact of Soviet policies. Extensive irrigation projects diverted water from the Aral Sea, causing it to shrink dramatically and leading to ecological disaster. The depletion of the sea's water levels devastated local ecosystems, decimated fishing communities, and created a significant health crisis due to the release of toxic substances from exposed seabeds. Other regions of the Soviet Union also experienced environmental degradation. Industrial centers such as Norilsk and Magnitogorsk became notorious for their severe air pollution, causing health problems for residents and contributing to global atmospheric pollution. The Soviet government eventually recognized the environmental consequences of rapid industrialization and implemented some measures to address them. Environmental protection agencies were established, and efforts were made to develop cleaner technologies and reduce pollution. However, these initiatives often fell short of achieving significant improvements, and the environmental legacy of Soviet industrialization continued to pose challenges in the post-Soviet era. 2.17 Religion and Atheism. The establishment of the Soviet Union brought significant changes to religious life. The Soviet government adopted an atheistic ideology and sought to eradicate religious beliefs and practices, viewing religion as a potential source of opposition to the communist regime. Religious institutions were targeted, and the government aimed to replace religious practices with secular alternatives. The state discouraged religious education and promoted atheistic propaganda through schools, media, and cultural institutions. Churches, mosques, and synagogues faced restrictions, and religious leaders were subjected to scrutiny and control. Many religious buildings were repurposed for secular use or destroyed, and religious communities faced persecution and harassment. Despite these efforts, religion persisted in Soviet society, albeit underground or in limited forms. Some individuals maintained their religious beliefs privately or participated in religious activities discreetly. The state's attempts to eradicate religion ultimately proved unsuccessful, as spirituality and faith continued to hold meaning for many individuals. It is important to note that the suppression of religion was not uniform throughout the Soviet Union. In certain regions, particularly areas with significant non-Russian ethnic populations, religious practices were tolerated to some extent. The government recognized the importance of maintaining social stability and often allowed religious observances within certain boundaries. 2.18 Nationalities and ethnicities within the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was a diverse federation comprising numerous nationalities and ethnic groups. The government recognized the importance of accommodating the interests and aspirations of different ethnic groups within its borders, while also seeking to maintain control and unity. The Soviet government implemented policies aimed at promoting the cultural and linguistic rights of various nationalities. It established autonomous republics, regions, and territories for different ethnic groups, granting them a degree of self-governance and cultural autonomy. These regions were allowed to develop their own educational systems, cultural institutions, and media outlets, promoting their distinct identities. However, it is important to note that the Soviet government's approach to managing ethnic diversity was complex and multifaceted. While it aimed to foster a sense of national identity and unity, it also sought to exert control and ensure loyalty to the central authority. The government promoted the idea of a Soviet identity that transcended individual nationalities, emphasizing loyalty to the socialist state. National cultures and traditions were celebrated, but within the framework of Soviet ideology and under the guidance of the Communist Party. Ethnic tensions and conflicts were not entirely absent within the Soviet Union. Historical rivalries, territorial disputes, and economic disparities occasionally led to friction between different ethnic groups. The Soviet government intervened in these situations, employing various measures to manage and resolve conflicts, often resorting to repressive measures to maintain control. The Soviet Union's approach to nationalities and ethnicities evolved over time, reflecting changing political and ideological circumstances. In the early years, the government adopted a policy of indigenization, promoting local languages and cultures. However, During the Stalin era, there was a shift towards greater centralization and Russification, which led to the suppression of regional languages and cultures. The Soviet government also pursued a policy of population resettlement, particularly during and after World War II. This resulted in the displacement of millions of people, often along ethnic lines, and had long-lasting social, economic, and cultural implications. 2.19 The legacy of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union's legacy continues to shape the countries and regions that emerged from its dissolution. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 marked the end of an era and brought significant changes to the political, social, and economic landscapes of its successor states. The post-Soviet period was characterized by economic transition, political upheaval, and challenges in nation-building. The newly independent states had to grapple with issues such as privatization, market reforms, and the establishment of democratic institutions. The transition was often accompanied by economic hardships, social unrest, and political instability. The legacy of the Soviet Union also left a profound impact on the collective memory and identity of its people. The experiences of living under a socialist regime, the struggles for independence, and the traumatic events of the past continue to shape the narratives and aspirations of individuals and communities. The geopolitical implications of the Soviet Union's history are also significant. The collapse of the Soviet Union led to the emergence of new independent states and a reconfiguration of power dynamics in the region. The dissolution of the Soviet Union had far-reaching effects on global politics, marking the end of the Cold War and ushering in a new era of international relations. 2.20 Economic policies and the planned economy. One of the defining features of the Soviet Union was its planned economy, which aimed to create a socialist system of economic organization. The Soviet government controlled and directed economic activities, determining production targets, allocating resources, and setting prices. The planned economy was based on the principles of central planning and collectivization. The state owned and operated the major means of production, including factories, mines, and agricultural land. The agricultural sector underwent a process of collectivization, with individual farms being transformed into collective farms or state farms. The planned economy sought to achieve rapid industrialization and prioritize heavy industry. The government invested heavily in sectors such as steel, coal, machinery, and defense, aiming to build a strong industrial base and catch up with more advanced capitalist nations. While the planned economy resulted in significant industrial growth and modernization, it also had its shortcomings. Centralized decision-making and the absence of market mechanisms often led to inefficiencies, misallocations of resources, and supply shortages. The lack of price signals and competition made it difficult to gauge consumer demand and incentivize innovation and efficiency. The planned economy also faced challenges in adapting to technological advancements and incorporating new knowledge and practices. 2.21 Agricultural policies and the challenges of collectivization. The Soviet Union implemented ambitious agricultural policies, particularly during the period of collectivization. The government aimed to transform the agrarian sector, increase agricultural productivity, and achieve self-sufficiency in food production. Collectivization involved the consolidation of individual farms into collective farms or state farms. The government sought to eliminate private land ownership and create large-scale agricultural units that could benefit from economies of scale and modern machinery. However, collectivization was met with significant resistance from the peasantry. Many farmers viewed it as an infringement on their property rights, traditional way of life, and independence. Peasants were often forced to join collective farms against their will, and those who resisted faced harsh penalties, including imprisonment or deportation. The process of collectivization was accompanied by violence, confiscation of grain and livestock, and widespread disruption to agricultural production. The forced collectivization resulted in a decline in agricultural output, food shortages, and widespread famine in certain regions, most notably during the Great Famine of 1932–1933 in Ukraine. Despite the challenges and human costs of collectivization, the Soviet government persevered with its agricultural policies. Over time, the collective farms became the dominant form of agricultural organization, and agricultural production increased, although often at the expense of quality and efficiency. 2.22 Social welfare and the provision of basic needs. The Soviet government placed significant emphasis on social welfare and the provision of basic needs for its citizens. It sought to create a society where everyone had access to healthcare, education, housing, and employment. The Soviet Union established a comprehensive system of free healthcare, providing medical services to all citizens. The government invested in the construction of hospitals, clinics, and medical facilities throughout the country. Health indicators, such as life expectancy and infant mortality rates, improved significantly during the early years of the Soviet Union. Education was also a priority for the Soviet government. The state established a free and compulsory education system, providing universal access to primary, secondary, and higher education. The government invested in the construction of schools, universities, and technical institutes, aiming to promote literacy, scientific knowledge, and technical skills. Housing was another area of focus for the Soviet government. The state played a central role in providing affordable housing for its citizens. Mass construction projects were undertaken to address housing shortages, and many people were able to obtain state-subsidized housing. The provision of employment was also a key objective of the Soviet government. The state aimed to achieve full employment and provide job security for its citizens. The government created a wide range of job opportunities in various sectors, particularly in heavy industry and public administration. While the Soviet government made significant efforts to provide social welfare, it is important to note that access to these services was not always equal or of the highest quality. In some cases, there were regional disparities in the availability of healthcare and education. Moreover, political considerations and ideological conformity could sometimes affect access to certain services or employment opportunities. Chapter 3: The Countries that Broke Free, Independence and Challenges. 3.1 Introduction to Post-Soviet Independence. The dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 led to the emergence of 15 newly independent states. These countries faced the challenge of establishing their own identities, political systems, and economic frameworks after decades of Soviet rule. The transition to independence was a complex and multifaceted process, marked by political, economic, and social upheaval. The newly independent states had to navigate issues such as nation-building, territorial disputes, economic reforms, and the establishment of democratic institutions. 3.2 The Baltic States, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. The Baltic states Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania were among the first to regain their independence from the Soviet Union. These countries had a distinct history and cultural identity that they sought to reassert after decades of Soviet rule. The Baltic states faced the challenge of building new political systems and transitioning to market economies. They implemented economic reforms, privatized state-owned enterprises, and sought to attract foreign investment. These efforts led to significant economic growth and integration with the European Union. The Baltic states also focused on strengthening their democratic institutions and aligning their policies with Western norms and values. They embraced liberal democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, becoming members of NATO and the European Union. 3.3 Central Asian Republics, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. The Central Asian republics faced unique challenges in the post-Soviet era. These countries had significant ethnic diversity, and their borders were drawn arbitrarily by the Soviet government, leading to tensions and conflicts. The Central Asian republics grappled with issues such as nation-building, governance, and economic development. They sought to balance traditional values and customs with the demands of modernization and globalization. Some of the Central Asian republics, such as Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, pursued economic reforms and sought to attract foreign investment. They focused on developing their energy sectors, promoting trade, and diversifying their economies. However, these countries also faced challenges such as corruption, authoritarianism, and income inequality. Other Central Asian republics, such as Turkmenistan and Tajikistan, faced greater political and economic difficulties. These countries struggled with authoritarian regimes, weak institutions, and socio-economic disparities. Political stability and human rights remain significant challenges in these countries. 3.4 Caucasus, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. The Caucasus region also experienced significant challenges in the aftermath of the Soviet Union's dissolution. Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia faced complex political conflicts and territorial disputes that continue to shape their trajectories. The Nagorno-Karabakh conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan was one of the most enduring and contentious issues in the region. This conflict resulted in a protracted dispute over the territory of Nagorno-Karabakh and surrounding areas, leading to violence, displacement, and strained relations between the two countries. Georgia also faced internal conflicts, most notably in Abkhazia and South Ossetia. These regions sought independence from Georgia, leading to armed conflicts and political instability. The Caucasus countries focused on establishing democratic institutions, economic reforms, and regional integration. Georgia, in particular, made significant progress in its democratic transformation and efforts to attract foreign investment. The region's strategic location and energy resources also played a role in its geopolitical significance. 3.5 Ukraine, Belarus, and Moldova. Ukraine, Belarus, and Moldova faced unique challenges in their post-Soviet journeys. These countries were closely tied to Russia, both economically and politically, and their transitions to independence were influenced by these historical connections. Ukraine, in particular, experienced a complex path to independence. The country faced political tensions, economic struggles, and regional divisions. The Orange Revolution in 2004 and the Euromaidan protests in 2013 to 2014 highlighted the desire for democratic reforms and closer ties with the European Union. Belarus faced ongoing challenges in establishing democratic institutions and maintaining political stability. The country has been ruled by President Alexander Lukashenko since 1994, and his regime has been criticized for its suppression of dissent and human rights abuses. Moldova, located between Romania and Ukraine, struggled with political divisions and economic difficulties. The country experienced a protracted conflict in the breakaway region of Transnistria, which sought independence from Moldova. 3.6 Challenges and legacies of post-Soviet independence. The countries that broke free from Soviet control faced numerous challenges in their paths to independence. These challenges included economic restructuring, political instability, ethnic tensions, territorial disputes, and struggles with governance and corruption. The legacies of the Soviet era continued to influence the post-Soviet states, shaping their political, economic, and social landscapes. The countries had to grapple with issues such as the privatization of state-owned assets, the reintegration of ethnic and cultural identities, and the forging of new geopolitical alignments. The transition to market economies was often accompanied by economic hardships, as the countries faced inflation, unemployment, and the dismantling of state support systems. The social safety nets provided by the Soviet Union were no longer in place, and the new governments had to develop their own social welfare programs. 3.7 The quest for national identity. One of the significant challenges faced by the newly independent states was the quest for national identity. After decades of Soviet rule, these countries sought to re-establish their distinct cultural, linguistic, and historical identities. Language played a crucial role in the formation of national identity. Many post-Soviet countries adopted policies to promote their native languages, recognizing them as official languages and emphasizing their use in education, government, and media. This was particularly important for countries with diverse linguistic backgrounds, such as Kazakhstan, where Kazakh became the official language alongside Russian. In addition to language, cultural heritage and traditions were also revitalized and celebrated. Folk dances, music, festivals, and literature became symbols of national pride and identity. Efforts were made to preserve and promote traditional arts and crafts, as well as to rediscover and reclaim historical narratives that had been suppressed during the Soviet era. Historical memory played a crucial role in shaping national identities. Many countries faced the challenge of reconciling different historical narratives, particularly those related to Soviet repression and collaboration. Historical research, museum exhibitions, and public discourse aimed to uncover and acknowledge past atrocities, as well as to honor the resistance and sacrifice of those who fought for independence. 3.8 Economic reforms and transition challenges. The transition from a planned economy to a market-oriented system presented significant challenges for the newly independent states. The Soviet economy was characterized by central planning, state ownership of resources, and a lack of market mechanisms. The post-Soviet countries had to undertake comprehensive economic reforms to create functioning market economies. Privatization was a key aspect of these reforms. State-owned enterprises were transferred to private ownership, often through voucher privatization or direct sales. The goal was to stimulate competition, increase efficiency, and attract foreign investment. However, the privatization process was not without controversy, as it sometimes resulted in the concentration of wealth and the emergence of powerful oligarchs. The transition to a market economy also required the establishment of legal and regulatory frameworks, including property rights protection, contract enforcement, and competition policies. These reforms aimed to create a level playing field for businesses, promote entrepreneurship, and attract foreign direct investment. However, the transition process was not smooth for all countries. Some faced significant economic challenges, including hyperinflation, fiscal deficits, and currency devaluations. Structural adjustments and austerity measures were implemented to stabilize the economies and restore growth. International assistance and cooperation played a crucial role in supporting the economic reforms. International financial institutions such as the International Monetary Fund, IMF, provided financial assistance, technical expertise, and policy advice to help countries navigate the transition. 3.9 Political transitions and democratic consolidation. The post-Soviet countries also faced the challenge of transitioning from authoritarian rule to democratic governance. While some countries embraced democratic principles and established stable democratic systems, others struggled with political instability, corruption, and the consolidation of power. The establishment of democratic institutions, such as parliaments, independent judiciaries, and free media, was a key focus. These institutions were crucial for ensuring checks and balances, protecting individual rights, and upholding the rule of law. However, building strong and independent institutions proved to be a complex task, as many countries struggled with political polarization, weak party systems, and the entrenchment of old Soviet-era power structures. Civil society and grassroots movements played a vital role in advocating for democratic reforms and holding governments accountable. Non-governmental organizations, human rights activists, and independent media outlets provided a platform for dissenting voices and contributed to the development of a vibrant civil society. Electoral processes and political transitions were also significant milestones in the post-Soviet countries' journey towards democracy. Elections were held to select new leaders and determine the course of political change. However, some countries faced challenges related to electoral fraud, voter intimidation, and the manipulation of power. 3.10 Geopolitical shifts and regional integration. The independence of the post-Soviet countries led to significant geopolitical shifts in the region. The collapse of the Soviet Union resulted in the emergence of new borders, the reconfiguration of alliances, and the realignment of regional power dynamics. Many countries sought to establish closer ties with the European Union and NATO, aiming for integration into European political and economic structures. The Baltic states, in particular, successfully joined these organizations, strengthening their ties with Western Europe. At the same time, Russia sought to maintain its influence in the region, particularly in countries with large Russian-speaking populations. Russia's assertive foreign policy and efforts to maintain close ties with the post-Soviet countries have raised concerns about the erosion of their sovereignty and the potential for conflicts of interest. Regional integration initiatives also emerged among the post-Soviet countries themselves. The Commonwealth of Independent States, CIS, was established as a forum for cooperation and coordination among the newly independent states. However, the effectiveness of the CIS in promoting regional integration and resolving conflicts has been limited. 3.11 Social and Human Development. Alongside political and economic transitions, the post-Soviet countries faced significant challenges in social and human development. The Soviet era had left a complex legacy in terms of social infrastructure, education, healthcare, and social welfare systems. Education systems underwent substantial changes as countries sought to redefine curricula, promote national languages, and integrate into the global knowledge economy. Reforms aimed to enhance the quality of education, modernize teaching methods, and adapt to new technological advancements. Efforts were made to align education systems with international standards and promote critical thinking, creativity, and entrepreneurship. Healthcare systems also faced challenges during the transition period. The Soviet system had provided universal healthcare, but it suffered from inefficiencies, lack of investment, and shortages of medical supplies and equipment. Post-Soviet countries had to restructure healthcare systems, attract healthcare professionals, and improve access to quality healthcare services. However, these reforms were often hindered by limited resources and funding constraints. Social welfare systems underwent significant transformations as well. The Soviet Union had provided a range of social benefits and guarantees, such as pensions, housing, and employment security. However, the transition to market economies necessitated the restructuring of social welfare systems. Some countries implemented social assistance programs, while others focused on developing social insurance schemes to ensure protection for vulnerable populations. However, the effectiveness and coverage of these programs varied across countries, and challenges related to poverty, inequality, and social exclusion persisted. 3.12 Environmental challenges. The post-Soviet countries also faced environmental challenges as they transitioned to independence and market-oriented economies. The Soviet era had left a legacy of environmental degradation, particularly in areas such as industrial pollution, deforestation, and the mismanagement of natural resources. Countries had to address these environmental concerns while promoting sustainable development and economic growth. Efforts were made to strengthen environmental legislation, establish regulatory frameworks, and promote environmental awareness and education. International cooperation and assistance played a crucial role in supporting these efforts. Several countries in the region, such as Estonia and Latvia, embraced green technologies and sustainable practices. They prioritized renewable energy, energy efficiency, and ecotourism as key sectors for economic development. These countries became leaders in environmental innovation and set ambitious targets for reducing carbon emissions and promoting environmental sustainability. However, other countries faced challenges in managing their natural resources and mitigating environmental risks. Extractive industries, such as oil and gas, posed environmental and social challenges, including land degradation, water pollution, and displacement of local communities. Balancing economic development with environmental preservation remained a complex task. 3.13 Diaspora communities and transnational connections. The post-Soviet countries also had to grapple with the presence of diaspora communities and transnational connections. The Soviet Union had been a multi-ethnic and multicultural entity, and its dissolution resulted in the dispersal of populations across different countries. Diaspora communities maintained strong ties with their countries of origin, often providing financial support, investments, and cultural connections. They played a role in fostering trade and economic cooperation, promoting cultural exchanges, and contributing to the development of their home countries. Transnational connections also emerged through migration, with people seeking opportunities abroad or being displaced due to conflicts and political unrest. These migrations had diverse impacts on the countries involved, including brain drain, remittances, and cultural diversity. Countries sought to engage with diaspora communities and leverage their resources and expertise for economic development and nation building. Efforts were made to establish institutional frameworks, such as diaspora ministries or departments, to facilitate engagement and address the needs of diaspora communities. 3.14 Regional conflicts and security challenges. The process of gaining independence from the Soviet Union was not without conflicts and security challenges. In several regions, ethnic tensions, territorial disputes, and separatist movements emerged, leading to violent conflicts and protracted instability. One notable example is the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Nagorno-Karabakh, a predominantly ethnic Armenian region within Azerbaijan, declared independence, leading to a full-scale war in the early 1990s. The conflict resulted in a significant loss of life and displacement of populations. Despite several ceasefire agreements, the dispute remains unresolved, posing a persistent security challenge in the region. Similarly, the Transnistria conflict in Moldova and the conflicts in Abkhazia and South Ossetia in Georgia emerged as separatist movements sought independence from their respective countries. These conflicts not only resulted in human suffering but also created challenges for the post-Soviet countries in maintaining territorial integrity and ensuring stability within their borders. In addition to internal conflicts, the post-Soviet countries also faced external security challenges. The dissolution of the Soviet Union led to the emergence of new international borders, and disputes over borders and territories continued to simmer. These challenges were further complicated by the presence of Russian military bases in some of the newly independent states, which raised concerns about sovereignty and security. Efforts to address these conflicts and security challenges involved diplomatic negotiations, peacekeeping missions, and international mediation. The Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, and other international organizations played a role in facilitating dialogue and supporting conflict resolution processes. 3.15 Economic integration and trade relations. Following independence, the post-Soviet countries sought to establish economic integration and build trade relations with other nations. Some countries focused on regional economic cooperation within the post-Soviet space, while others sought closer ties with the European Union, the United States, and other global markets. Regional integration initiatives were established to foster economic cooperation and remove trade barriers among the post-Soviet countries. The Commonwealth of Independent States, CIS, created a framework for economic collaboration, including the development of a free trade area. However, the effectiveness of these initiatives varied, and challenges such as divergent economic interests and political tensions hindered progress. Several countries implemented market-oriented reforms and actively sought foreign investment to stimulate economic growth. They pursued privatization, liberalization of trade and investment, and the development of export-oriented sectors. Foreign direct investment played a crucial role in modernizing industries, improving infrastructure, and creating employment opportunities. Trade relations with Russia remained significant for many post-Soviet countries due to historical ties and geographic proximity. However, the reliance on Russia as a primary trading partner also posed risks, as economic and political fluctuations in Russia could have spillover effects on the economies of these countries. Efforts were made to diversify trade relations and reduce dependence on a single market. Countries explored opportunities to engage with global markets, attract foreign investment, and promote their export industries. They sought to leverage their unique resources, such as energy reserves, agricultural products, and skilled labor, to enhance their competitiveness and attract international business partners. 3.16 Social and cultural transformations. Independence from the Soviet Union brought about significant social and cultural transformations in the post-Soviet countries. The transition to democracy and market-oriented economies created new opportunities and challenges for social dynamics, cultural expressions, and individual freedoms. Freedom of expression and media plurality expanded as censorship was lifted and independent media outlets emerged. Journalists and artists gained the freedom to explore diverse topics, challenge established narratives, and engage in critical discourse. This newfound freedom allowed for the revitalization of cultural expressions, the promotion of cultural diversity, and the preservation of historical heritage. However, the social transformations also led to cultural and generational tensions. Traditional values clashed with modern lifestyles, and societal norms underwent rapid changes. Younger generations embraced global influences, while older generations sought to preserve traditional customs and values. Migration also played a significant role in shaping social dynamics. Economic opportunities abroad, political instability, and conflicts prompted people to seek better lives in other countries. The movement of people resulted in diaspora communities, transnational connections, and the blending of cultures. Women's roles and rights were also redefined during this period. While the Soviet era had promoted gender equality and women's participation in the workforce, the transition to market economies brought new challenges. Gender-based discrimination and unequal access to resources and opportunities persisted in some areas, highlighting the need for continued efforts to promote gender equality. 3.17 Governance and institutional reforms. The post-Soviet countries faced significant challenges in establishing democratic governance and building effective institutions. The transition from authoritarian rule to democratic systems required the creation of new political structures, the development of legal frameworks, and the establishment of transparent and accountable institutions. Political reforms varied across the post-Soviet countries, reflecting their unique historical and cultural contexts. Some countries successfully embraced democratic principles, implemented constitutional reforms, and held free and fair elections. They established independent judiciaries, parliamentary systems, and mechanisms for checks and balances. However, other countries struggled with democratic consolidation, facing issues such as political corruption, weak rule of law, and limited civic participation. The transition to democracy was often accompanied by political instability and power struggles, impeding progress in governance and institutional reforms. Transparency and accountability were crucial elements in the post-Soviet countries' efforts to establish good governance. Anti-corruption measures, public administration reforms, and the strengthening of civil society played significant roles in combating corruption and promoting transparency. Independent oversight institutions, such as ombudsmen and anti-corruption commissions, were established to investigate allegations of corruption and promote accountability. Civil society organizations emerged as important actors in promoting democratic values and advocating for social and political change. They played a vital role in monitoring elections, advocating for human rights, and promoting civic engagement. However, civil society development varied across countries, with some facing constraints and restrictions on their activities. 3.18 Reconciliation and dealing with the past. The legacy of the Soviet era presented challenges in terms of reconciliation and dealing with the past. The history of oppression, human rights abuses, and political repression under Soviet rule left deep scars on societies and individuals. Many post-Soviet countries embarked on processes of truth-seeking, justice, and reconciliation to address the injustices of the past. Truth commissions, memorialization initiatives, and legal reforms were implemented to acknowledge and document human rights violations, provide reparations to victims, and promote accountability. The process of reckoning with the past also involved the opening of archives and the public disclosure of previously classified information. This allowed for a better understanding of the extent of human rights abuses and state repression during the Soviet era. It also provided an opportunity for individuals and communities to confront their painful past and seek closure. However, dealing with the past remained a complex and sensitive issue. Different societal groups had divergent narratives and interpretations of history, leading to tensions and conflicts. The process of reconciliation required fostering dialogue, promoting understanding, and finding common ground. 3.19 International relations and geopolitical considerations. The post-Soviet countries had to navigate complex international relations and geopolitical considerations as they sought to establish their place in the global arena. They faced the challenge of balancing relations with neighboring countries, regional powers, and global actors. Russia's role as a successor state to the Soviet Union and its close ties with some of the post-Soviet countries posed both opportunities and challenges. For some countries, maintaining good relations with Russia was important for economic and security reasons. However, concerns about Russia's assertive foreign policy and its attempts to exert influence in the region raised questions about sovereignty and independence. The post-Soviet countries also sought to establish relationships with other major powers, such as the European Union, the United States, and China. They aimed to attract foreign investment, access new markets, and strengthen their diplomatic ties. However, the pursuit of these relationships required careful navigation of competing interests and geopolitical rivalries. Regional organizations, such as the European Union, NATO, and the Eurasian Economic Union, played significant roles in shaping the post-Soviet countries' geopolitical orientations. Membership or partnership with these organizations provided opportunities for economic integration, security cooperation, and alignment with international norms and standards.